Your next essay is going to be a problem solution essay. You may have heard this type of writing referred to as argumentative or persuasive writing, and all of that makes sense. Any of those terms work. Essentially, you're going to persuade your reader to care about a problem that you identify, and you're going to offer solutions to that problem. One solution or several solutions. So I'm limiting this to a problem in your community. And by your community, what do I mean? Well, certainly it could be the city or town in which you live, but it could be a little bigger too. It could be your entire county, perhaps, or even your part of the state you live in. I would even probably be convinced to do it as a statewide problem. I would call that your community. But it also doesn't have to just be the community that you live in. It could be any community that you are a part of. So for instance, OTC, the college community at OTC, that would be a great community to address. Or maybe your workplace, that's a community that you're a part of. So you can kind of think a little broadly about this idea of community, but I do want it to be something that's limited. I'm doing this because I used to not limit it, and I would have students who would choose the climate as the problem they wanted to solve, climate issues, climate change, or homelessness. And those are such important problems. They're huge, but they're almost too big to tackle in a paper this size. So by limiting it to your community, I hope it, first of all, gives you something you really care about. And second of all, it's something that isn't too big, isn't too broad. I mentioned OTC, the school community here, as a community that you could choose for this paper. And I wanted to give you an example that one of my students wrote about. She chose to write about online classes and wishing that all online classes at OTC were more consistent in how they were built and laid out, so that every time you went into a Canvas site, you knew exactly what to expect. And she had some great research. She interviewed an instructor who she thought did a really good job on their Canvas site. She also interviewed a student with a lot of experience. She used her own experience. So that would be a perfect example of a community problem that has to do with the school community. As you begin thinking about organizing this problem solution essay, there are a couple of different ways you can do it. You can start and lay out the entire problem and then offer the solution or solutions. Or you can lay out the problem, and maybe it's a multifaceted problem. There's several different parts to it. So you can do problem, solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. I'm okay with either way that you want to organize that. One thing that you must do in a persuasive or argumentative essay is answer your critics. So you have to anticipate what someone arguing on the other side of this issue would say in response, and then kind of cut them off ahead of time. Like, go ahead and answer those concerns before they're even raised. So I'm going to go back to that example I used earlier of the online classes being more consistent. Someone arguing against that might say, but what about the instructors' individual freedoms and putting their personality into classes? Every class is different. Why shouldn't the sites be different? That would be the argument. And then you have to think about that and come back and say, sure, but you can still have freedom within a certain parameter of making the class more consistent to make it easier for students to access it. As you're offering solutions to the problems you identify, it's important that your solutions be feasible and that they make sense. You can't just come up with a crazy solution without any backing behind it. It has to be something that could actually be done. I'll give you another example. I had a student who wrote about the fact that she feels housing should be more affordable for single mothers. I encourage her to go out a little bit to single parents, make it single parents instead of single mothers, but her thesis was single mothers. And one of her solutions was that landlords should just cut the rent for anyone who's a single parent or single mother. And while I think that's great, I would love that, how are you going to get landlords to cut rent? They need to make their money too. It was a nice solution, but not practical, because I don't think any landlord's just going to say, oh, okay, well, you're a single mother. I'm going to lose money and rent to you. That's probably not how it's going to work. So then she came back to me and said, what if they could get like a tax incentive for reducing the rent for single mothers? That's a little more practical. That's something that maybe if you could give them a tax incentive might work. So that's kind of the difference. So think, as you're offering the solutions, look for things that have either been tried before, maybe in other communities, or things that just you think could be done based on the research you've done on the problem. Think about how the solution could be implemented, paid for, all of that, because you can't just throw out a solution unless it's a feasible, practical option. So the last point I want to make is about the outside research. You are going to be using outside sources for this essay, and you can find outside sources to support you with your problem. Maybe statistics or data that show how big the problem is, maybe personal examples of people you know, maybe your own examples, but you also need that outside research. And then the solution is another place where you can do outside research, solutions that other communities have tried, solutions that can be backed by some kind of information you could find online. So I think you can put the research in for both the problems and the solutions for this paper, but just make sure that as you're crafting the argument, you really are persuading. Anytime you write a thesis statement, the thesis should be arguable, but especially with a problem solution essay. You're going to lay out the problem, and you're going to persuade for some solutions, at least one solution, maybe more. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of an overview of what I'm looking for, and always reach out if I can help. Thanks.